Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate life and the pursuit of happiness. Guys, we're live on the I Love CVille Network in Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world. Today's show presented by Yes Realty Partners. Find them online, Yes Realty Partners. Keith Smith, Yonna Smith, and their team, just fantastic at what they do, helping you guys buy and sell homes at Yes Realty Partners. Guys, we'll give some props and some love and attention to Intrastate Service Company, a home's best friend. Intrastate Service Company has over 50 years of proudly serving the Central Virginia and Shenandoah Valley communities. Intrastate Service Companies. And Judah Wickhauer, our director, will start first with the studio camera and welcome a true cast of characters to the program. And I will start with my friend Nickolas Urpí over at the head of the table. Good morning, Nickolas Urpí.
Good morning, Jerry. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, my friend. And Keith Smith, the distinguished gentleman, good morning.
Yeah, we're sharing a mic together.
I see that.
This is going to be fun.
This is the sharing season.
You know he likes you, Nick, when he invites you on the show because he has to give up some microphone time.
Oh, yeah.
And talking is quite
Am I
important.
really that bad?
Well, no, you're not that bad.
No, you're very likable. But you like to talk, though,
He
Keith.
wore the opera tie just for me.
I wore the opera tie just in honor of
And it's just gorgeous. I love it.
How about Nickolas? For those that are not watching the visual product, what is the opera tie?
So it has the different operas in German across Keith's tie. So it starts with Die Zauberflöte by Mozart, Lohengrin by Wagner, Rigoletto, Verdi. That's Aida, also Verdi, and then La Boheme and Madame Butterfly, which are both Puccini.
Okay.
And I love it. It finishes off with Madame Butterfly.
Aida's is opera.
I see that.
I love
Okay.
it.
Well, there's a history behind the tie. This is my father-in-law's, and it was part of his gift to me when he passed away. And he has ties, and I have bow ties that are circa 1919, 1918. That I'm just afraid to actually put on because they're it's pretty neat stuff.
Johnny Ornella says, Buenos dias, chicos.
Buenos dias, Johnny. ¿Cómo está?
We love J.O. He really likes it when the shows blend together. Johnny Ornella says. So we have a combination of 3 different shows right here, which is beautiful. Let's get the closer in the mix. Xavier, ¿qué pasa, chico? How are you?
Encantado.
Good.
Delighted to be here. Thank you so much, Keith and Jerry, and I think we have too much fun when we come here. I think everybody expects a lot of information, and then we just have fun.
Yeah,
and
that's not going to happen.
Not today. Yeah.
Now when Nickolas hits the bar and gets us involved, we like that quite a bit, my friend.
And then we start talking opera, and then it becomes a whole thing.
I love that about you. And Alex, how are you, my friend?
Doing wonderfully. Loving it.
It's good to have you guys. Keith Smith, a lot of topics you want to cover on a glorious Tuesday morning, my friend.
But I want to start with the holiday season, right? It's Christmas time. It's Hanukkah. It's a holiday season. So whoever wants to jump in, tell us about Christmas in the Urpí family. I'd love to hear about that.
So it's interesting because Christmas in the Urpí family had to blend 2 traditions, right? Because my wife's Italian, right, and I'm Spanish, but in our family we had Spanish and Cuban. So when I grew up, Christmas Eve would be Cuban tradition, and Christmas Day Spanish tradition. So now we had to go from that to Italian tradition, right? So
you do the 7 fishes?
So typically on Christmas Eve we will have some type of fish dinner. It's not always 7 fishes, right? So, but we will have a fish dinner. And then Christmas Day we'll kind of rotate. Every once in a while we all decide to do something completely different. But I think the beauty about Christmas in the Urpí house is that we've begun to express our joy of Christmas through different nationalities. Like one year, there's this movie that we like called
The Shop Around the Corner.
Yeah. Right?
It takes place
Love
in
that movie.
in Budapest.
Yeah.
Budapest. Which version?
And the old one.
The original
The
version.
original version.
There was a remake of that, which was so-so.
Yes, no, the
And
original
who
version
was
with Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart.
Yes,
That's right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you
Not
recall
the
the
Julie
end
Garland
of that movie.
Not the Julie Garland. Yeah, that one was horrible.
I love the Urpí so much. I love them.
So I don't know if you remember the end
We'll
of that
talk real
movie.
estate, but little.
At the end of that movie, the shop owner,
Yeah.
he's looking for someone to spend Christmas with because he's lonely.
Yeah.
And he offers
he goes
the
through
meal.
it.
He goes through the whole meal with the little kid and says, do you like roast goose with baked apples? And what is
And
it?
he goes,
Say?
"Yes."
Cucumbers with sour
Cucumbers
cream.
with sour cream.
There was the
yes,
red
yes, yes, the
cabbage,
red cabbage. And so one
chicken
Christmas
soup.
we literally made that. Like the
That was
meal
the
that he
meal.
listed off from the shop around the corner, we made and had
It's a
for
neat little
Christmas.
story. It's a neat little love story because they write letters
It
and
is.
they have pen pals
Exactly.
and they hate each other and they turned out they actually loved each other.
Exactly. And what I love about that one is it throws in also the other little side story with the lonely
owner.
shop owner.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
at the end he finds
What was his name? You check.
Mr.
Mr.
Matichak.
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 Mr. Matichak.
Hugo Matichak.
I was.
Yeah, we
There was
watched
an
it
H.
every
There was
year,
an
but-
H there somewhere.
Yeah, I knew you knew the H. I
So
figured
we
about
did that one year, and that was
So, do you guys celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?
That's a great question.
in terms of opening presents.
Let's whatever you.
So
We
Define to
celebrate
celebrate.
from December 1st through January 6th.
I know. I can
No,
see.
it's December
January
6th.
6th.
December
I know, I'm supposed
6th.
to point that out.
December 6th. We go basically
I'm
from
sorry.
St.
I
Good
didn't
thing
mean
my
to
fi-
start.
no,
I
it's okay.
apologize.
It's a good thing that
That's
my
my fault,
fiance's
man.
at work. Let's just say that.
I apologize.
Yeah, I think I did. That's another one. What did he do the other day? He said
He said he was wrong. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, I
He made a
heard that.
mistake.
No, when
made a
I was
mistake.
selling my house, I made a mistake.
made a mistake. I was like,
I
that's
learned,
not
I learned a
possible.
life lesson. Here's the lesson I learned. Contact a trusted advisor.
There you go.
Do it yourself.
In all things you do, in marketing,
Contact
right?
a trusted
in
advisor.
financing,
Yep.
and in
And
real
real
estate.
estate.
Contact them.
Trusted
So
advisor.
which one, guys?
So just basically, we celebrate from December 6th, which is St. Nicholas Day,
Got it.
through January 6th, which is Epiphany.
Got
So the
Little
Three Kings
Little
Day.
Christmas. Well,
Three
we-
Kings.
We would call Little
A Little
Christmas.
Christmas, and in Spain, Three Kings Day.
Well,
Right.
And we'll do the gift giving on Christmas morning because we wake up. My dad makes every single year, for as long as I can remember, my dad makes Spanish hot chocolate, which it's essentially melted chocolate, basically. It's so good. He makes it over the stove,
Is it
melted
milk chocolate or?
Well, it's just
Dark-
dark chocolate.
dark chocolate.
Is it
Yeah.
bitter chocolate?
No,
No,
an
it's-
actual
it's
chocolate.
semi-sweet.
Like
Is it
it's-
interesting?
Oh, it's
It's
no,
not
it's
cocoa.
delicious.
Oh, it's delicious. It's
It's
delicious.
great, yeah.
And it's not a cocoa base. It's actual melted
it's
shaved
melted chocolate,
chocolate
yeah.
Okay.
that he melts, and then we'll have it with either cookies. Sometimes when my mom will make churros,
churros, yeah.
or she'll make little Italian donuts, and we'll have that on these little Christmas dishes that we've had for as long as I can remember. I don't remember a Christmas without them.
Yeah.
And
are
then we'll open the gifts that we have for each other.
So
We do keep something for January 6th. I will say that. Lately, we always keep like a little gift, and we will open it either on Epiphany or on the
Just
Sunday
the Three
of
Kings.
Epiphany.
The Three
because
Kings
the
come
Three
later
Kings-
and bring
That's
Jesus
right.
gifts.
Well, because the tradition in some countries is, well, actually, I think in Scandinavia, the tradition is to open gifts on St. Nicholas Day.
That's exactly
and
right.
in Spain,
You have your
though,
own
it
day.
was- yeah, I have my own day.
Very
That was
nice.
yesterday. I was like,
Okay.
feast day.
his head's big enough as it is.
I love my feast day. It's the best one, St. Nicholas.
Oh, God, I wore a
Patron
tie.
saint
You had a
of-
holiday.
I know.
How,
I love
how
it.
have the
Patron saint
traditions
of
and the events changed, the festivities changed with the special ladies in the mix?
Ooh, good question.
No.
It's only gotten better. They came over like this weekend and
Oh,
made
to make
cookies with
cookies.
the whole family.
Okay.
So
But is there a blending of a different nationality?
Great
or-
question.
Yeah.
Or a different culture?
We haven't
into
gotten
it?
there yet. I mean,
well,
let's-
No, but
my
they will be.
fiance, her family, one half of her family
Fiancé.
comes from the Ukraine. So
Oh,
she
Ukrainian.
brought her great Baba's recipe
Oh.
for like these little butter cookies with pecan.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And that's what we made on Saturday, and they were fantastic.
So this is like really what's great about this country, right? The same thing in my family. Like my wife is Austrian, we're Italian, we're Irish, we have Jewish in our family, we have Latino in our family, and everybody brings a little bit of something to every meal, or family gathering. But my family typically celebrates Christmas on Christmas Eve.
Oh, yeah,
That's
the Eve.
Interesting.
That is very Italian, very that part of the Mediterranean, for lack
So you'll
of a
exchange the gifts on Christmas
we
Eve
do
as well.
everything on Christmas Eve,
interesting.
but we always keep a couple of gifts aside for Christmas morning, and then what we call Little Christmas.
Yeah, I like that, right?
And yeah. It's any opportunity to get more gifts is always a good thing.
I was going to say, just got to spread it out. That's the whole
exactly.
point.
Is it Rosalia? Did Rosalia?
Yes.
Cordaro?
Yes. Leah.
Where is she watching?
Leah's probably watching from New York.
Nueva York.
Right now.
She
Nueva
says
York.
Italian traditions. Help me out here.
Yes.
La Befana. Gift
La
of-
Befana
gift
is
for
the
the
gift
kids.
giver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Leah, we love you, Leah. Thank you for watching. No, Leah does the
So
best.
that's the Christmas witch.
La
La Befana,
Yeah,
but
not
obviously in a
Leah.
positive sense. Not
Be
Leah.
careful.
Brings gifts.
La
No,
Befana
no.
is the
Not Leah.
So we're doing an Italian lesson here too now? Is that what's happening?
They're so smart, these guys. I love these
Well, we
guys.
love the Christmas season, so like
Yeah.
the traditions, especially. But La Befana is the one that delivers a lot of the
Yeah,
gifts in
yes.
Italian tradition.
And Leah does the best Christmas parties.
Oh, Leah, you're getting
Leah's
some
Christmas
props here.
parties.
Yeah, we love you, Leah.
Well, why are Christmas parties so good?
Oh, the whole family would get together. Leah's my mom's cousin, our cousin,
Okay.
and the whole family.
Yeah.
In the old days,
gotta
we
be
would
like
go
40
for,
people
like
sometimes.
40 Italians together on Christmas Eve.
It's loud, but it's fun.
It's so much fun, and you play.
I'm only
It's loud when there's only 3 people, so imagine 40.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you play Piatto,
it's
which
great.
is like this game at like you play at
Did
like
you ever play
midnight, and the
Piatto?
bid plate goes around, and you pull a card, and you either win all the money, like you choose what you want to bet. So you say $1. They pull up a card, and I think if it's higher than
if it's higher than a 10, you get what you
win
bet.
what you bet.
And
if it's lower, you have to put
it
that
in.
money in the pot.
Or you can say piatto, which
means you're betting the whole
If
big
you win, you get the
plate.
whole pot, or else you have to put
Oh, you
in
have to pay the whole pot.
Yeah.
Like if
That
there's
sounds
50 bucks in
risky.
there.
Oh, it is risky. It is risky.
lose every
It is
time.
not
I
investment. It is
learned a long
gambling.
time ago, never bet with an Italian, particularly a Sicilian.
But you're part Italian.
But they're all Sicilians,
I
though.
learned this
You
because I
never
don't
win.
bet with them. Or a
She
Cuban.
says 35 people this year.
35
party.
people this year.
All family.
Yeah.
There you
Yep.
go.
We had that many at Thanksgiving. We're
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
we're a pretty big family when we get together, and we were missing 2 brothers' families.
Wow.
So that was only
So your
3 of us.
Family from Seattle flew over
No,
to?
Seattle came down, Connecticut came
Beautiful,
down.
beautiful.
But actually, my 2 closest brothers couldn't. They ended up having like 15 people of their own, and so they did their own little thing. But we all got together at the end of the evening to eat a bunch of pumpkin pie, drank a couple of barrels of wine, and
Barrels
couple of
wine.
barrels
Love
of
that,
wine.
Yeah.
isn't that the way you're supposed to do
Love
it?
it.
Yeah.
That's
Sounds
the
great.
way you do it.
You bend your head
Celebrate.
and open the spout.
Let's give some props to David Varell, who's watching in the Outer Banks via
Hey, Dave.
Ivy, Virginia. Now living the dream in the Outer Banks. David Varell, we love you. David Varell, when you're back in Charlottesville, Emergent Financial Services. These guys can help with so much stuff. Not that you need help, my friend. You're already living the dream. But Emergent Financial Services, David Varell, for even more wealth building. Keith Smith.
Well, what they'll do is they'll make you better.
Yeah, they'll make you better. David Varell is a great guy. I love that guy. Former business owner, exited his business, multiple businesses, if memory serves correct, David. Keith Smith, the topic, first one you want to hit, my friend.
Oh, geez, you know what? I'm just trying to recover a little bit from yesterday's show. But since I've got a gentleman sitting to my right that's about ready to get married, I'm going to pull out the stat that we were talking about yesterday, if I can get to it.
Make sure you go into that microphone over there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. This is a good one about are you going to hit that topic with him? Okay.
Well, he's getting married.
Yeah, this is a good one. Giddy
Stop
up,
hogging
Nick.
the microphone.
Yeah, no, okay.
So according to a 2000 Harris poll, 82% of all the buyers last year decided to buy instead of getting married. So what's happening, and I'm hearing this with my we kind of helped pay for the other weddings, but my youngest daughter was saying that same thing. You know, we gave them an opportunity. Hey, take this check and use it to go buy a house. But our youngest daughter's living in Seattle, so that check for the wedding wasn't close enough to do anything with. But they said if they weren't living in Seattle, they would have did the eloping, they would have took the check, and they would have bought. So 82% of young folks are choosing not to go through the expense of a marriage and going ahead and buying a home. And I just thought
like the big wedding, or like they're not getting married at all. Like,
No,
so they're tying the knot, but
no,
not
yeah,
at
I
a
think
big
the- I
event.
think the
Yeah,
article
so
is,
if you read into the article, it's we're not doing this 30, 40, whatever this huge dollar
Got it,
amount
got it.
thing. They're going to a justice of the peace. They're getting married or whatever, but they're not spending the money on this huge event, and they're using the money to buy
house
a home,
and
which to build, which is what we talk all the time, is generational wealth. This article apparently came out too late for me, so
Just a couple of years.
a couple of years.
I was going to say traditions are shifting anyway. Some people are living together before getting married, and so like all of a sudden the home becomes more important.
That's nothing new, by the way.
It's nothing new, but some people are making that decision. Like you have to.
That's why it's a tradition. It's
I
been
was
happening for a long time.
Yeah, well, it is. It's been happening. It's one of those traditions. And well, obviously, some people aren't doing that. But it is interesting that now, because millennials were actually the ones who were like the latest. I read to get.
To
And
get
unfortunately, I
married.
don't have the statistic with me.
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, perfect. So let's
on
get
going.
into that. Because that was one of the things, like, they got into the market later than most other groups in the past. So this is the point at which they're maturing and they are not as interested in having the party that's all about them. They're more interested in which is a good thing in what the marriage means, which is that you're living together with somebody for presumably the rest of your life, or at least for most people, they're making the commitment for at least for the rest of your life. So you understand that, like, that involves, like, I'd rather have a home. I'd rather have that standard of living where it's like more space, ready to start a family, ready to start having kids.
45 million millennials between the age of 26 and 35, they're projected in 2022.
Yeah.
To buy their first home?
No, this is the number of millennials
The number of
45 million in the U.S.
in the United States.
So we're talking a 325 million total U.S. population. You're saying 45 million millennials is what? 12%, 13%?
And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you guys are super smart about this stuff. I suspect out of that 300 million, you've got a car, and how much is it little people? How much is it, people over the age of 20-something, right? That kind of thing. And the other interesting stat is people are not getting married or buying houses until they're 30s.
Yeah.
the
They're
30s.
waiting longer.
So what do you make of that?
It's what we've been talking about forever. It's why we started what we're doing 240 shows ago, is to reach out to that demographic and communicate with them that it's okay to do this, right? It's okay to buy. It's okay to move along with that.
There is a fear. I think part of it is, just speaking as technically I'm a millennial myself, 1992.
You're a millennial.
That I'm millennial.
Yeah.
So you're first.
You're on the upper end of it, though, right?
I'm
No.
What
middle. As I say, he's in the
smack
middle.
in the middle.
He's in
Yeah, he's in the middle. Millennial starts at 81, 82.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So smack in the middle of it, and just thinking for myself, right? My first major memory, right, of the housing market is
The recession.
the time of great unpleasantness.
Yeah.
Right. So that is going to taint how you look at buying a home, right? I'm going to delay that till I'm very certain that I can afford it, because my memory is many people who bought homes that they couldn't afford and then got foreclosed on.
Yeah.
So that if that is your first major memory of that, that's going to change your behavior in terms of when you choose to buy a home, because you're going to put that thing off as, if you don't rent, period, you're going to put that off as long as possible till you sit there and say, am I 100% certain?
Yeah, but I think that's, we have to take a step back and see what happened in 2008, because that's somewhat, a lot of people come to us and say, what happens if I buy a house and the house value goes down? And I tell them, this is your home. It's in other words, think of the same thing. If you're renting, do you worry what the value of that building is? You don't worry, you're just renting, right? So when you buy a home, you have a mortgage. That mortgage stays the same for the rest of your life, right? Unless you refinance or whatever, right?
Or however long the term of the loan is, right?
Right. Exactly. For the 15-year, 20-year, 30-year, whatever the time of the loan is, right? So this concept that, I buy a house and what if I can't afford it? You can either afford it the day you buy it or you can't, right? Yes. Do things happen in life? Do you possibly, maybe you lose your job or something like that?
What I'm saying is,
understand.
at that time, the issue was people
But
who
that's because
couldn't
people
afford it at the time.
What happened is in 2008, right? And correct if I'm wrong, Keith. The issue there was twofold.
Remember most of this, by the way, so that you know. Just saying.
But it's history, right?
Are you saying I'm old too?
No,
Yeah.
they remember it. It's history.
I've only
We go.
been Nick Xavier.
So
Young
part
fellas.
of what happened there was that the housing market had been going so strong that people were now buying homes without putting any down payment, right? No skin in the game, right? In order to flip them, right? What happens is the more they did that, eventually what happened, they got stuck because the market prices started to come down, and now you're holding the bag saying, uh-oh, I'm leveraged, I own all these houses, what do I have to do? I have to sell them all. If you bought a house just for yourself, you didn't have to, right? Now, if you were one where you said, even if you bought it interest only, as long as you could afford that, you didn't have to do
Well,
anything.
the thing about the interest-only loan is that it had a balloon period on it, right? And that was what really caught most folks, right?
But the short balloons.
The very short balloons, 24 months, 36
Yeah.
months. All of a sudden, it jumped up 3-4 points, whatever it was.
Substantial.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the reality of it is the lending requirements back there were, let's say, pretty much non-existent. They just evaporated. And, people ask this question of us all the time, right? And I'm sure you guys get it. Are we going to have a repeat of that? And I don't mean to sound Pollyannic, how do you say that?
Yeah, that's good. No, I like that word, yeah.
Was that close?
Whatever it means, yeah, it's
There
great.
you go. Pollyannic about this. But I truly believe this. The systems are here to really safeguard that. Now, we were talking yesterday, and we're going to have a mortgage broker, Scott Morris from Ross Mortgage, come on Friday. They're starting to talk about no-doc loans and stuff like that. So, Xavier, you remember them, right?
Right, exactly.
So, that you might want to explain a little bit of what the impacts they had then and what they could have, or anybody.
You're asking me to explain what you
What
do
I
for a
already
living.
know?
Yeah.
So I prefer not to say it out loud. I'll let somebody else do it.
No doc loans are basically what, if I'm correct, that basically means that they will give you a loan without really looking at your finances to see whether or not you can afford it, what
That's
kind
right.
of collateral you have. And without any doubt, that was part of the issue that we had.
Well,
in
the second phase of that was that if the appraisal worked, well, the problem was the first bank of Alex and was using the Nikki, the appraiser, and again, Southern Italy.
I can
kinda
understand
out.
Like, looks good to me.
So jumping
That's
guys.
no, I mean, that's the kind of risk that you don't like to see, right? In other words, so far, so good on the housing market. It's been booming. It's been going very well. Granted, low interest rates have fueled that also. Yes, you have all the millennials that, as opposed to buying homes at 24 and 25, they started much later, right? And so you see that continue to come. I see no reason why we should go to no doc loans whatsoever. Continue on the process, make sure that it works, because, I mean, we've talked about this. There is a short supply of homes. I mean, there's more buyers than sellers still, and more buyers than there are new homes. So why do we need to pressure anybody, or why should we lower the standards if there's not enough buyers, if there's enough selling inventory?
It's being done for a social justice equity.
That's how
movement.
2008 started, right?
I'm with you. I'm
So
with
the
you.
original intention of no doc loans were for guys like us, right? Independent, business folks that, maybe I'm making enough money, but my balance sheet doesn't quite look that way because I'm a small business guy. That was the original intent, to help the small business folks get a loan, but unfortunately, with no regulatory oversight on it, it just went.
Goes everywhere.
It just went nuts. So pivot a little bit to what you guys do. So how's business? How's the stock market? And what?
On fire right now.
Yes.
Today it's on
Today
fire.
it's on fire.
Yesterday it jumped quite a bit. right?
Yesterday and today, and then obviously Black Friday through last week was pretty rough.
It's been choppy.
It's been choppy.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing sort of that little bit of low volume, little bit of nervousness in the markets. But the key with December, one of the things that always happens is December, of course, is you have the major mutual funds that begin to rebalance. You also have a lot
Target
of
date
401k,
funds.
target date funds did a lot of 401k inflows, and that tends to push the market up. When you have, one of the key things to look at times like this is, at least for me, is always volume is what reduces volatility. When you have a lot of people buying and selling, your volatility is lessened. When you have very few people buying and selling, people go to sell, there's no one there to buy, market looks like an elevator going downwards. So that's always the key to kind of look at, and as you head into the end of December, you tend to see a little more volume just because of the fact that the 401ks are getting a lot of contributions at that time, and which they have to do at the
bonuses
end.
and everything.
At the end of the year, they have to put in those contributions, and then the funds that run those, that manage those contributions, need to go out and buy stock.
So the folks who may not listen and watch and may not know why do they have to put that money in before the end of the year?
That's required particular for the employer match. The employer
And it's
match
also
has to come
tax
in.
perspective too, isn't it not?
So exactly. So the 401ks and the simple IRAs have a December 31st deadline, as opposed to like your typical traditional IRA or Roth IRA, which gives you till April 15th. So if you're your own small business, let's say you got a simple, your Roth IRA that you've been putting money in, you can actually make a 2021 contribution all the way up till April 14th of 2022. If you have a business plan, a simple IRA 401k,
It's March, right?
yours needs, well, the business matching portion can go in March. The employee portion
put in his own.
has to be done by December 31st.
So that's an
It's a
important
year
thing
end.
for folks that are watching that may be, working for a company that matches that they need
Oh,
to make
yes.
sure this is done by the end of this year, right?
Absolutely. You need to make sure, especially, we always advise people, the key is you gotta what's the percent of your salary that your company's gonna match? So let's say your company says, I'm gonna match you up to 4% of your salary. You wanna get your 4% into that 401k before December 31st. Because then your company's gonna have to match that 4%. If you wanna put more, great, but at least get the free money. Get the match.
Match,
Up to that
please, match.
up to that percent that they're matching before December 31st is your
Yeah.
key.
So what do you think is the rest of the year here? We have, 24 days left of this year. What do you call it, the Santa Claus rally?
The Santa Claus rally. It kind of is.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a Santa Claus rally here?
Well, traditionally we see it, and I think it's
Traditionally.
part of what Alex was saying. Even though that that's changing a little bit. A lot of people put money into their 401k plans
On a regular-
basis, right? However, when you think about it, a lot of target date funds do their asset allocation at the end of the year, and target date funds, as you know, for people who don't understand what they are, let's say you're Alex's age and you think you're going to retire 30 years from now. So that target date fund would be
It's a 2051
2051 fund,
Target
right?
date fund.
So that means that literally this fund has to become less and less risky over time. So by 2051, it's shifted out of a lot of stocks into other safer instruments, right? So this asset allocation happens at the end of the year for many funds. So think about it. If the stock market was down just a few days ago and you're doing an asset allocation, and bonds, as you've seen, have really rallied in here from about a month ago, now you're taking money out of bonds, putting into stocks or other areas, and so that fuels the market. So all this adds to the fact that at the end of the year, the markets have a tendency to do a little bit better.
What do you think, Nick? Jump in here.
No, I was just looking because I was going to jump in and say that, but my dad caught me on the bull. I mean,
Sorry.
Interestingly enough, no. Well, the funny thing is you call it the Santa Claus rally, which is a much better term, but I had heard it called the whales of investing among a lot of the investors. It's just that a lot of
You say whales?
Whales,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Because the target date funds are
because
are the big ones.
they're the big fish. They're the ones that come in at the end of the year and are buying.
So you realize a whale's not a fish, right?
I know.
Okay,
Yes.
just
mammal.
checking. Just
Big
checking.
well,
Just checking.
kind of like a fish. They're in the ocean.
No, it's not like a fish at
Kind of
all.
like a fish. I know they're mammals. Yes, I'm well aware.
Just checking. that's
Yeah, no. You just like to embarrass
You're the
me.
one that, just one
Well, watch to make sure you're paying attention in biology.
Yeah, no. I got to come up with a big word next time for Keith. Because now that I know
I'm
sure you will.
More than 3 syllables, it'd be a big word for me.
physiognomy.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. But I guess just to reiterate, that was just the main point is that if when that happens, and Alex was saying volume, it's going to make it more stable. And as we know, stability is something, as QB was saying yesterday on the air, the stock market tends to like that. Most markets tend to like. I mean, the freak out that we got over Omicron was just also, it's one of those things that whenever you see like a dip like we had, or the week that we had, sometimes it's waiting to happen. Like we haven't had a really large. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. We haven't
Since
had a
Q1.
we haven't
Since the
had
first quarter.
Did that even qualify as the correction?
Was that
Did
a correct-
drop
did
No,
10%?
so some sectors dropped about 10%.
Okay,
yes.
So-
so I mean that was literally the first correction, because the correction in
Since
the market
March.
is minus 10.
Yeah.
That's the first correction since
part
March.
of what
Yeah.
happens is that you just get like almost like the pressure builds, and then something's going to come pop it. So the question is, was it Omicron? Was it the fact that the market was just primed for a correction,
Was it
or
Powell?
I mean.
It was all these factors.
You
Then
see
all
how he
happened
tries
at the
to get me
same
in trouble,
time.
right? Yeah. So, but exactly. So, I mean, it's one of the things that it was waiting to pop, and then and let's face it, a lot of people are sort of like, when bad news comes out, they're looking, they're like, now's a good time to take my
Take some
gain on
gains.
this. Now's my good time to take my gains on this, and then reallocate.
Why would Powell do the tapering press conference at the same time Omicron is breaking globally?
Because
I mean, he put fuel on the fire.
isn't the
I
brightest
think
bulb.
well, I wouldn't say that.
Oh, I would definitely say that.
Yeah, no. my experience with this stuff is probably there was a total miscommunication going on here, and his handlers, whatever information probably didn't make it to him. But I want to rally this whole conversation back to real estate. When you guys were chatting, I just did a quick historical search. What was this Dow in 1981? Did you look at my numbers?
I was like, look. Well, he doesn't have it up.
It was under 1,000 points.
Yeah.
1981. What is it today? 33,000.
32,000.
What was interest rates back in those days? 12, 13, 14%.
Yeah.
What are they? 3 or 4%? You know, it's just, you know, that it seems to me, and I'm not a market guy, this needed to be adjusted a little bit. It kind of felt a lot like the housing market back in 2000 and
But we're not at the recovery points. We are not at, and you've pointed this out many times here, we are not at full recovery here.
No, we're not. There's a gap that we've been seeing, and probably, I would say, since the 80s at least, where...
Yeah, but 2008, 2009, 2010, it was between 8 and 10,000 points.
Oh, no, it's the last decade has been a massive stock market
I guess my
decade.
point is I'm trying to rally back to housing, and the best way to hedge against inflation is to own a home, right? The best thing in the stock market is get in it and stay in it.
And stay in it.
And stay in it, right? Because these numbers, historically, even in the time of great unpleasantness, it was 8,000, 10,000. But we've 3 times since that point, unless my math is wrong, it's 3 times up.
Absolutely, yeah. And we've talked about that. But I think, you know, and I think this is maybe a little bit where Jerry was going. And the times have changed a little bit, right? So in other words, when you talk about where interest rates were back then, right, where the stock market was and where housing was, think about where we are now. I mean, interest rates are literally at 0, right? 0 meaning from a perspective of where the Fed is, they're at 0.
On the Fed side.
Right, on the Fed side, they're at 0. Mortgage rates are at the lowest they've ever been. I know a few months ago they were even lower, but they're the lowest they've ever been. So with mortgage rates as low as they are, they're going to fuel, right, the housing market. I mean, they just have to, right? Second of all, in addition to that, if you're in an investment portfolio and you're sitting there and you're going, okay, I'm getting 2% on my bond allocation, and inflation is now running, even if it was running before at 3% and now it's running at 6%, I can't live like that because I'm losing money every single day.
Yeah.
So I have to do something, so I shift into stocks in the hope and prayer that they're going to continue to grow at 7%.
Realtor.com is projecting rents to increase nationwide by 7.1%.
So that means you have to have somewhere an increase of 7.1%
Somewhere.
In
in
your
your income levels, right? And if you're a retiree, where do you go for that?
Now, so what's the expected increase of mortgage next year?
Great question. Thank you, sir. They are projecting between 3.3 and 3.6. So it's going to be under 4%.
Yeah.
You know, and that, you know, look, you know, that's like me, like we're all saying that this, well, where's my wand? That I can't get
over there, Nick.
can't get my wand. That's like saying, proof the stock market is going to be 50,000
Exactly.
points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that'd be amazing.
I'll
Love
take
that.
I'll take 3%.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But you know, I've been doing this for 3 decades. I've never heard, and this is only the last couple of years. It started in 19, where lenders and mortgage associations were predicting what interest rates are going to be 12 months down the road. I've never heard of that before.
Interesting.
And they're sticking pretty close to it on it. So, but look, the reality of it is, you know, we talk about this on the show all the time, is the lack of inventory.
Yeah.
And there's a question I want to ask you guys here in a little while on why something is happening here, and we might end up breaking one of the 3 rules that I have on the show. On that.
What is going to put headwinds in front of this market? What is going to slow the market down? Is it going to be the tapering? Is it going to be the labor shortages? Is it going to be Omicron? It looks like the market is looking now beyond Omicron.
Well, it's not going to be
So-
Omicron. I mean,
Okay, so is it another variant? What's the headwinds in front of us here?
It's difficult to say. To be honest, the biggest headwind is our response to things. As my girlfriend likes to say, we're like, COVID's not going anywhere, right? It's not going anywhere.
My son-in-law, the doctor, was saying it's here.
It's
not
here to
going
stay.
anywhere.
We're all
So
gonna
the
get it.
question is, how do we respond to news of new variants? Do we make decisions that put headwinds against the economy, or do we say, yes, we can take our usual, we talked about this on your show,
Yeah.
take our usual precautions and keep going? Because the only major headwinds at this point are things which we impose on people, which hamper the ability for people to go out, which hamper the ability for small businesses to run, which hamper the ability for the average people in our community to make money. And
So you're
that's-
saying the headwinds are government involvement?
and
Overreach,
our own
government
decisions.
overreach.
Our own decision. I mean, if the government doesn't tell me to stay home, but I choose to stay home because I'm acting out of fear, that's the equivalent of the government saying you must stay home.
Xavier?
So
You're choosing your words carefully over here. I see you.
No, I'm not
He's
choosing my
laughing at
words.
me
I just,
'cause
I
I'm
just
biting my
think,
tongue.
so when you talk about headwinds, and I don't think of it as headwinds. What I think about is, what black swan event is going to occur. And one never knows, and that's why there's black swan events, right? But there's so many things going on that are going to push the markets up and down throughout the next year. I mean, China is one, right? You have China.
Yeah.
You have the COVID. It seems like every time something happens, there are cities and towns and mayors and whatever, there's chaos, right? And that's not good for the economy, right? You have certainly a situation where the supply chain has caused inflation. Is it transitory inflation? Is it inflation that's going to last a little longer? What's the Fed going to do? So there's so much uncertainty out there right now that the markets have to digest this. And every once in a while, as you mentioned, if 2 or 3 happen to pop up in the news at the same time.
Same
boom.
week.
Exactly, same
So,
week.
so as a guy who does this on the periphery, this is really not my thing. I'm a real estate, I'm a dirt guy. I got to have dirt. I got to have sticks and bricks
Right.
is how my brain operates. But it seems to me a lot of this is less about economics. A lot of this is less about technical stuff, more about, emotional stuff, right? Information, news.
Well, some of it, Powell and the tapering is economics. And,
That I would agree.
Okay.
That I would
And
agree.
Powell in the, I'm going to get out of the way here. I love your take on Powell so much on the program here. Powell just needs to be quiet a little bit.
Well, the whole Fed needs to be quiet, and the reason is because they've put themselves into a hole, right? I mean, they put themselves into a rabbit hole that is very difficult to get out of,
But
right?
Xavier, what was the big difference in 1980, 1981, the early 80s, and today? What's the big difference?
The biggest difference is back then, right? The amount of debt and the amount of size that the Fed balance sheet had was almost nil. So it was a lot easier for the Fed to come in and basically begin to control the markets through interest rates than they are today. They allowed interest rates to go down as low as possible. The government has borrowed trillions of dollars.
Which
The Fed has
bought.
bought trillions of dollars. So we're sitting here and we have a situation where the interest payments today are like $440 billion, and the average interest rate on funds today are about 0.5. Imagine if we double that. Now you're doubling the amount of interest. So in other words, they put themselves into a hole that they say, yes, we'd like to raise rates because inflation is getting out of control, but even if they raise rates by 1%, what is that going to do? Nothing. So you can't raise rates to the point where you're going to squash inflation because it's going to destroy
The government.
the government.
Yeah.
So where I was going with that?
Yes.
Where I was going with that.
Tell me.
The big difference between 1981 and now, if Powell said something in 1981, it would take weeks to get around the world. It would take days to get around the world. Now, if Powell says something,
Oh, it's instant.
it's instantaneously around the world. And I read an interesting article. China, is now saying that its real asset is data. It's not gold, it's not oil, it's not anything. It's information and it's data. And it was an interesting article that I read on that. Now, they have the ability to mine it because of their system,
And interesting
right?
is data we have freely given them.
Well, then that's the
By
whole.
our own
that's
volition.
that's a whole.
That's
a whole show
why
new
we-
itself.
that's why we just shut
Understanding
that down.
data, though, is also like a key, which is why you see
Sure.
so many people like jumping on board of like companies like Snowflake and Palantir, that they're like data cruncher, data understanders.
Data science.
Data science, right? Because I mean, you can't just like collect data because it doesn't mean anything unless it's like
You can
statistics.
interpret the data.
You have to be able to pick it apart. You have to look at it from all angles. You can't just be like, okay, here's data. What does it mean?
So
You
in
know?
that article, the Chinese government has set up so that if your children are playing a game, They only can do it 3 hours a day and only on weekends. The phone won't work. They will not be able to actually
Interesting.
access it into that. And that's all about data mining.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all
It
that
is.
stuff. So
That's
pivot a
about
little
control.
bit. Excuse me?
It's about control.
Yeah.
We all kind of lived in that part
Yeah,
of the world.
exactly.
We know what that really means. So inventory. I just read an article yesterday, and I wanted to throw it out to you guys because I don't understand it, and maybe you guys can help me out a little bit. So we're talking about inventory. Inventory from my world is new construction, right?
Right.
We've got to generate inventory. In your world is creating new companies, right, and coming on the stock market or whatever. I'm going to read this because I couldn't believe it. The U.S. Commerce Department moved forward with an administrative review to double the tariffs on Canadian lumber shipments into the U.S. from 9%, I'm going to round it, it's at 17.9, to 18%. So they're double, in a time that we need housing inventory, they're going to double the tariff. I don't think it's actually been put in place yet on that
No,
end.
administrative review means they're desiring to go forth with it and basically saying, does anyone have any objections to this? But
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
I think I just raised my hand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, because so
That's an
is that how
absurdity.
that works? I don't really know how that works.
That's how that
Yeah.
works. Yeah, and unfortunately, usually administrative review, highly unlikely to not go through.
Yes.
Why
Who drives
in
that
today's
bus?
world, why even consider that?
Is that the administration
Well,
that drives that bus?
yeah,
because-
no, the
because
administration
the
will be driving
$1.5
that.
trillion stimulus package was free. That's why.
No, and don't forget, I think also this is a little bit currying favor with other people from whom we buy
Yeah.
lumber. I think there's two other countries.
Yeah, that's what it says in here.
There's two other countries that, one of which is China, if I'm correct.
It's literally. it
And
says
to
China.
not,
I'm surprised.
to not anger that one, we are hampering
Angering
ourselves.
Yeah,
in terms
anger
of
the
Canadian-
Canadians. They won't do nothing.
I mean, this is
I
part
lived
of
in Canada for a while.
this
and I
is
love
part of the issue, though, because we know just from a mathematical standpoint that the best thing from on the consumer level is free trade because
Yeah.
trade is better for everyone. My comparative advantage. This is it's law. It's not something that can be argued with. It's just math. So when a government is making the decision to do this, obviously there are social reasons for doing this. There's macro political, like international
Geopolitical
politics,
reasons.
and then there's domestic politics. Now on the domestic side, they're getting to raise some money, and they're currying favor with their macroeconomic partners. So China, global economic partners, I should say. Like so, China and what was the other partner?
What's the other one? China and
China
another,
and-
another major,
it was
major
some
trading
European
partner.
countries.
Okay, them. And
Them.
them, just whatever. It's
Those
not
people
Canada,
across the pond.
but the whole point is like it would make more it would make more sense to be open to everyone, right? I mean, that's the whole point, is because then you're going to get the best lumber from the people you
Just
like
a
to
lack
buy.
of foresight, because
It's-
we're here sitting talking about a lack of inventory, and correct me if I'm wrong, T, but I'm pretty sure lumber is one of the major components
Yeah.
that goes into new houses.
Well, what'll happen is the market, like it did the last time when the prices spiked, the market, the industry will adapt. And they move to some more, synthetic products, steel studs, concrete, so forth and so on. I mean, but if a 2x4 is going to go up by 10%, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 2x4s in that, and it's a big impact.
Explain. Okay, this is what I'd love to cover with you guys.
Okay.
We have a labor shortage to the point where labor has more collective bargaining and leverage than ever before to negotiate rates and salaries. Okay, so our workforce can negotiate a better rate now than. It's been a long time
been a
since
while.
they've had
It's
this
been a
much
while.
leverage. We got the housing market that is ridiculously, it's going crazy right now.
Right, exactly.
Okay, it's got so many tailwinds behind it. Okay, we have a stock market for the most part of this year. It's just been absolutely on fire, where
Yeah.
we're looking at 20% gains in our portfolios. Okay, we know this is not the norm here. What is going to cause the next disruption in housing, in stock markets, in small businesses here? You call it the black swan here. Kevin Higgins, we're going to get to this comment about cyber attacks. Other folks are asking about Evergrande in China with this default deadline that just recently passed.
Exactly.
Okay, and Evergrande can take down markets across the world. We saw that earlier this year, about a couple months ago, when this news hit the cycle. Markets were down here. What are we going to see that could potentially impact housing and the markets? Because these are intertwined.
I mean, you had a great
It is.
statistic, I think, on companies and labor force in terms of what they
Oh,
were
you're
going
talking
to pay.
about new construction side of it on
Even
the-
about how companies are going to have to start paying their employees much more next year.
Correct. Well, I just got a Wall Street Journal article. I didn't read it yet. Companies plan big raise increases for 2022. That'll be a good thing. I mean, obviously, it's supply and demand.
Well, they're going to have to as
Right.
well.
They're going to have
The
to.
workforce has more leverage than ever before to
you also
demand
got
more
this-
money.
This thing going on, what's called the Great Resignation. That's also a real thing out there. I thought you were
Changing of jobs and so forth.
I thought you were referring to in my industry or in the housing industry, we're between 300,000 to 400,000 construction workers short at any given month. Is that the quote? Is that the statistic? You were
That's the
thinking?
other one I was thinking of.
Okay, the
That
other
one
one.
and the one the company's doing the raises in 2022.
Yeah. So it's.
What do you think, Xavier? What are your thoughts?
So, it's really interesting because even Yellen today came out and said she doesn't understand why, there's still so much labor out there that hasn't been picked up, right? She says, I just don't even understand it at this point in time, right? So she's having trouble with it, which is the Treasury of the U.S., right? But
So you're referring to why we
Why there's so many open jobs?
why there's so many open jobs, right? She says, I don't understand it, right? And she said a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway, well, no, some of which, it's like, wait a minute, we've been talking about this for years, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they come out with it like, no, this is the smartest thing since sliced bread. It's like, hello, I mean.
It's amazing how out
but
of
anyway,
touch.
Yeah. Again, Jerry, I don't think anybody has a crystal ball, what's going to create, all this to stop going and moving, right? And I don't think anybody really knows. But without any doubt, and it's the same thing that Keith mentioned, right? Information gets out to us so quickly, right? Sure. But think about, and everything we do, I mean, and I'm sure most businesses, all their information is up there somewhere in the cloud. Well, the minute that your internet goes down, the minute that something happens, I think there is an enormous amount of businesses that have to be shut down, meaning like I can't work, I don't have data, I don't have information, my system's not working, I can't get to my software. I think that's a big issue.
That's an interesting thing you should say. On this 2020 Realtor magazine article that I was reading, it has much a stat that they're talking about 1 in 4 folks will be moving from the city out into the county because we have broadband to go and do this. So what you're saying is a broadband interruption or an internet interruption?
It's a major.
He's talking about potentially cyber attacks.
Cyber attack, yeah. If you have
Yeah.
a cyber attack, I mean, we had them here already, right? We had
Sure,
the
the pipeline
oil
got shut down,
pipeline,
yeah.
right? And we had the food. So if something happens of that sort, it can crash an economy very quickly.
And that's okay. So that just came in from one of the listeners, Kevin Higgins. Perfect timing. Recent cyber attacks seem to have suddenly gone away. Thoughts on how future massive attacks can impact the economy, fellas? He also adds, it seems certain to me that this country is not prepared and unable to respond to a series of mass attacks at once. If our supply and information chains take a big hit, writing more checks to attackers may not be enough. Can you imagine if Visa got attacked, people couldn't get home because they couldn't get gas in time? So this is a guy that's alluding to cyber attacks, which is timely for what you're saying here.
Exactly, and I think he's absolutely right.
he's correct.
And as much as we try to protect our systems, I don't think, and the most important thing is, one is protecting your system at work, right? The other thing is for the government and for the major industries, how well are those systems protected? Electricity, gas, credit cards, without any doubt. He's right. I mean, how many people walk around with cash in their pocket, and if you go up to a gas machine, do they take cash? No. You'd have to walk in and like Costco. If I buy gas there and I got cash, who do I give it to? Can't buy gas.
I'll take it.
I'll take it. Can you get gas in the car?
Totally, no problem.
He'll figure out he's got the little container that.
So
Oh,
all
no,
these
just,
are
I'll bring it
issues.
to you tomorrow.
So all these are issues without any doubt, and I wouldn't be surprised if a cyber attack is what begins to cause the markets really to tank. I wouldn't be surprised.
Which is why you also want diversification. Did I interrupt?
No,
No.
no, no.
I was going to say that's why we kind of want to make sure that we continue just from a and just on a macroeconomic and on a personal scale. If we're going to bring this down to the individual person, make sure you're sort of like prepared for different things. Like, everyone says change your, make sure your passwords are different, but like make sure your passwords are different. Like don't just, just don't change a number here and there. Make sure you're going through the proper channels. Like if you keep there's a reason that we have cash. And yes, I know you can't really, it's harder to go into the gas station and pay with cash, but if you have to sacrifice at Costco and go to BP and hopefully just get enough to get home, make sure you're prepared for things like that, because if you keep your entire life online, then you are keeping your entire life in danger of cyber attacks. You want to make sure the reason we diversify in stocks and in the market is because you spread the risk, and it's risk management. So do the same thing with other aspects of your life. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket. That's
Alex Urpí.
No, I think it's interesting what I think we're seeing, not just on this scale, but on the whole, in terms of the global supply chain, is companies have become very lean in order to make profit. And what I mean by that is they are buying just enough of everything you need along the way.
Well, the toilet paper was a good
toilet paper is a classic, right? But through every step of the creation process of producing goods, they have become very lean in order to squeeze every drop of profit that you can squeeze out of it. And the risk of doing so is that minor disruptions now mess up your entire supply chain. If I have 100 million nails in the warehouse, yeah, my profit doesn't look as great because I'm buying more nails than I need. But if something happens to the nail producer in China,
And you're in the
I now
right
have
spot.
100 million nails.
Well, perfect example. This is the chips.
This is the
Chips,
chips.
Yeah.
The very basic with automobiles, there's a lack of chips. Well, because they were only buying as many chips as they precisely needed, because they knew that at a moment's notice they could order more chips.
And now new
you
cars are
can't.
pinched.
New cars
look
are
at what
pinched.
Hertz did, right? When all these other companies that were car rentals, they sold off their inventory before the pandemic because they didn't think they'd be renting cars during, and
Figured
now
we'll buy a new one.
because they were going to
Fine.
buy new inventory, and now that didn't happen.
But hasn't the market adjusted a little bit by that? Because I think Ford is making its own chips locally.
They
in the
are.
United States.
Yeah,
They're
it's
beginning to
taking
adjust,
some
but
time,
there's
but-
your sort of
Yeah,
disruption.
sure.
About
Massive
6 months.
disruption.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a major disruption
Yeah.
for a time being there, and now they're attempting to, which may end up being a good thing, that you bring back some of these industries here and say, I'm going to make this myself to make sure that I'm protected in this way from these kinds of disruptions.
I mean, interestingly enough, did I interrupt you again?
Go.
I was just say, interestingly enough, this has happened. This has happened before in the sense of major disruptions that break global supply chain, global change of business. So, for instance, one thing I did remember is World War II changed a lot because companies that did business across Europe or did business with Japan had to break their existing business relations because you were literally at war with the other country. And then when it started up again, there were more efficient routes created because you had to now innovate because you weren't using established partners. So part of the problem is that you have the balance of having someone that you trust is great, but it can also lead to inefficiencies in the market. The market will come, human behavior will come create disruptions. Those things will break, and then you will have to create new efficient ways of doing business and then create the trust. So it's always a balance between those two, but it's interesting because here we talk about Taiwan Semiconductor couldn't make enough chips for the entire world now.
Yeah.
So now everyone had to start doing their own. Will that lead to better results? Will Ford have now, hey, we can do different things with these chips that we weren't doing before. That we weren't doing because we were just buying them. It's hard to know, but we'll see how those things play out. Obviously, my father is
Well, a little historical
giving me the
context to
face,
that.
yeah.
During World War II, we were not buying as much as we are buying from overseas right now, right?
Right.
We were not so dependent.
This happened more in Europe. I will admit, this happened in Europe because especially with Britain, because
Correct.
Britain was doing a lot of business with Germany, France, who were major industrial partners at
Versus
the time.
now.
Versus now.
It's substantial was coming
Yeah.
from overseas.
Now everything comes from everywhere. Like a pencil is
Yeah,
built to 40 countries.
and certainly when the containers back in the 70s came to fruition, the way they created containers that went straight from the ship right onto a truck, right? That created that. Now, the one thing I want to say, though, is without any doubt, this, the pandemic and everything that's happened has made us focus on the fact that we just don't produce enough in this country anymore, and we need to
Amen.
bring that production. However, having said that, let's be honest, one of the reasons that our inflation has been at 3%,
It's because of labor.
it's the labor, that's
Yeah.
right. You can't compete
You hear that,
against
Judah?
China.
That's what I mean, Judah.
Because let's face it, when China they're paying 10 cents on every hour, and over here we're at $15, $16, $17. That makes a big difference.
Well, that's initially what I thought of when Ford was coming back. A lot of it is automated, a lot
Yeah.
of it's robotic. But where are they going to get the skilled labor force
Skilled labor.
to go ahead and do that?
So the point is,
That's why it goes overseas.
if we begin to shift production to this country, then the cost of those goods are going to go up. So our inflation numbers will continue to grow for a period of time, and we have to decide, is that healthy for this country or not? But I think in the long run,
But in the
as we
short
always
term,
talk
no.
about,
In the
right.
long run, yes.
Thank you.
Exactly, because as
Yeah.
we always talk about, the real threat is not a temporary boost in inflation that then stabilizes. The threat in terms of planning for the long term is continuous inflation. That's what really throws you the monkey wrench. If everything goes up 10%, yes, you're more expensive, but if it stops there, you can plan around that and then begin to grow your assets again.
So this is why I love doing this show. I really do. And love having you guys on, because I learned something. And up until the show, my thinking was flawed. Go ahead, you can say something now. But was flawed.
We're a little used to it. So
Thank you,
so-
appreciate that. So it was flawed because I was thinking the biggest impact that's going to really be potentially to the housing market is inflation. I just had an aha moment. It's not that. It's if something happens to our cloud or happen to our cyber system. That's, I think, the next big thing. And I just wrote a note down
The
here.
biggest impact that's going to affect the housing market is the stock market. And the biggest impact to the stock market is we don't know, but what he said about cyber attacks is a damn good comment. Is a very good comment.
Well, that's, and I wrote a note down here because we're talking businesses and stuff like that. It also impacts individuals. And I'm going to see if I can get a couple of experts to sit in these seats and talk about how you can protect yourself, against that, because that was just an aha moment for me. I never really thought about that, but
it's less the individual concern and it's more institutional concerns.
Right.
He's more concerned with like these big Fortune 100, Fortune 50 institutional. Isn't that what you were alluding to?
we saw what happened with oil,
I
right? All of a
can't
sudden.
I can't help that. I
true.
have no, but I can help people protect themselves.
Right, and that's important because that happens all the time. Also.
Sure.
But,
If you're
but the point
if you're
being,
protected, then these Fortune 500 companies getting attacked isn't as big as presumably.
But I hate to say this, that if you go on the black web right now, all our passwords already are out there on the black web. The fact we could go right now on the black web and I can find out all your passwords if
Really?
you wanted me to.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, literally I could find out all your passwords. I'd have to pay somebody for them.
Yeah.
But our passwords for us individually are on the black web.
Right.
Now, Visa is a completely different story. Though they have many layers of protection for
Right.
Visa. What we have is not protected.
Yeah.
yeah, but we've seen that happen, though. I mean, we've seen, MasterCard, Visa in different stores be compromised. So do I trust 100% that what Visa, MasterCard, and all the other companies do is foolproof? No.
No, I don't either.
Because the real smart guys are on the other side, right? They're getting paid billions to crack these guys down, right? That's the way it works, and whether we like it or not, that's the way it works. But my point was before, Nikki, was that if you get a situation like the oil, right, where they attack the oil, we didn't have any gasoline. It doesn't matter how protected you are, your house, how much cash you have. If there's no gas in the pump,
There's no gas.
you can't get
obviously
anywhere.
it's gonna depend, right? It's gonna go case by case basis.
Right, I'm just saying,
Right.
it's attacking the electrical grid. Now you have no electricity, some people have no heat.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a big thing to hurt us big time.
Exactly.
I think we're saying.
Exactly.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit, guys.
Good.
Because I'm going to go back to this Realtor report that came out and projecting 2022. Hispanic home buyers are the number one growth demographic. They're projecting between one out of five buyers are going to
Hispanic.
be Hispanic, and I think that's really, that's a huge, it's the largest growth on it, and we're trying on at our little brokerage to try to grow that influence a little bit the best way we can to help them. But I thought that would be something. I know we had to spend a whole show talking about that a little bit. Just wanted to toss it out, see what you guys think.
So I thought that's an interesting statistic, and let's remember, I think right now Hispanics are one out of 5 is Hispanic in this country, I believe, right? Or is it 1 out of 10? I can't remember the
In
right
terms of the
statistic.
entire population?
Population.
1 in 10.
1 in 10,
One in
right?
10.
So
According to Realtors.
when you think about that, here is a culture that without any doubt, right, family comes first. And we always talked about that. And when family comes first, you want a roof over your head, and you want a roof over your head that is yours, that you own. And so I'm not surprised by that number, and I would suspect that number is probably going to be, spot on.
And what's interesting about the real estate statistic is that means a slight overrepresentation. In other words, 1 in 10 in the country is Hispanic, 1 in 5 of the new home buyers are Hispanic. So there's
The question is, what was it in the past? In other words, are they
Yeah.
coming? In other words, one of the things is you have, when you have migration here from different places, right? Sometimes it's that second generation that then begins to buy, or it takes a little time. I mean, you come here with not a penny
Well, that's
in
what
your
I'm saying. It shows you
pocket. It takes a few years.
The buying power in terms of home ownership with Hispanics is even greater than you would guess merely by the number of Hispanics that are in the country.
It goes back to this.
Your buddy helps with that too. I was going to say the phone.
Yeah, well, that helps getting information
But
out.
in the sense that, what I was going to say is that, jumping off my dad's point, you migrate from another country in the old days, and you probably knew this, like immigration from Palermo in the 1800s and early 1900s. Like you tried to do things like you had to rent, you had to scrimp and save. Most families didn't buy homes because they didn't think that was something possible yet. They were just trying to make do with what they had and get like a better life that was just good enough.
Both sides of my family, I'm second generation to own a home.
Yeah.
My mother and father was the first.
I was listening yesterday. I was like, yeah, I love it. But right, and that's the point. I think now on our side, like now, if I'm correct, and my mother probably knows this better than I was at my mother's side, they didn't own a home until when? Did they own right away or did they rent? Because she was told that they rented, I believe.
So they rented, yeah.
They rented, immigrating from Palermo. So on my mother's side, it's Palermo.
But on your side, they ended up buying.
Well, on my wife's side, some family members were able to buy a home.
Yeah.
The issue is that it's not immediate, right? They don't come
No.
here until years later. Just like my parents, yeah, they bought a home, but it took them a good 9-10 years before they had the ability to then buy a home.
Right. Perceptions are changing too, in the sense that like now younger people, especially even younger migrants, are like, this is something you do in America. Now you come, you don't just have opportunity. It's not just the job that you
I
get.
think that's why that number's so high.
Yeah.
When you speak to immigrants, and it was the same thing with my wife, right? When she came over, the first thing she said, "We're buying a house."
Yeah.
Right. Because even in Austria, that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
It's the ownership is very difficult in some European countries, and that was the first thing she wanted to do. We're going to buy a house. We're going to buy a house. We're going to buy a house. We saved up to 20% because back in those days you didn't do anything unless you had 20% down. On that end of it, that was.
And it's funny, we complain about it a lot. I think that there's challenges with buying a home, but it still remains an integral part of the American dream. Like it's still what many people.
And it's not historically something that people did. Most people did not necessarily own. There's a famous book by a Sicilian writer, Giovanni Verga, and the translation to English, they changed the name of the book to The House by the Medlar Tree. And the entire story is that this family loses their house because they couldn't afford it, and the entire rest of the book is about them trying to get the house back.
That individual house back.
That one house, because it was their family, and they had to rent, live other places, and it wasn't there. But like owning your own home, and I mean which is the essence of the novels, like the essence of a tragic story about a family that loses a home is like you want your home. It's your house. It's kind of like how Quentin Beckman was talking yesterday about like money isn't just an object in itself. It is a means to get something else.
It's a matter
right?
of place. It's interesting you should bring that up. So when my father-in-law passed away in 2009, we were in the middle of the time of great unpleasantness. They had a home in Yonna's home place, and unfortunately we couldn't hang on to it because we didn't have the fiscal means to do that, so we had to sell it. Literally, we're trying to buy that house back.
Yeah.
Literally, we're trying to buy that house back. So mainly because we want to send our grandchildren over to see where Yonna's from their
exactly.
her heritage and their home place on where that's at. Literally, that was happening this weekend.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how to buy it back.
Good for
Wow,
you.
good.
Yeah, but
That's great.
That's something that people. I mean, you sent us the article this morning about people not having their forever homes, but at the same time, that's different from when you're coming from somewhere where you didn't have a home at all, and now all of a sudden a home has importance because you can set down roots. It's the same story as like when the Italians came over and started making huge amounts of food. Like they used to do that because it's like, you're in America now. You can do that. You can show off how much food you have. You show off that you have your own house. You have your own
Well, I
things
don't know about that.
you.
I've been in Italy long enough where I couldn't eat my way off of the table.
Wow. Well, when my grandmother was growing up, all she had for dinner in an entire day was a piece of fish.
Sure.
Love that, Grandma. What do you think is going to slow the market down?
Me, personally?
Yeah, housing market.
The housing market? I don't know. The lumber seems to be like a really bad. I mean, listen, there's a lot of things that could slow. We talked about a whole bunch. I
Can
mean,
prices get so out of whack that it could slow the market down?
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt
Yeah.
about it. I mean,
Are we approaching that?
Well,
So let's put it in historical.
you can jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Historical perspective on that. But with this whole 2008, 2004, 2006, the appraisers, the system is keeping that down. We as real estate agents spend a lot of time trying to get the price to match with appraisals, right? It takes three entities to buy a house now, buyer, seller, unless it's cash, and an appraiser and a bank
Right.
on that end of it. So these appraisers are saying, no, that house is not worth $50,000 more than what the market is, and now the buyer is going to have to come up with the cash to go ahead and do that. So it's not going to have an impact because it's cash out of their pocket. They're not borrowing $50,000 more than what it's worth. So I don't know if this makes any sense, but I think the appraisers or the system is going to keep that process in check.
You know
Does that
what's
push
happening with
down
that.
demand at any point?
That's what I'm wondering.
As people are saying, now I'm having trouble coming up with this, or do they just then move to a house that's more affordable?
So where the
because they
demand is, and I'll pull it out over here because I can't get to it that quick enough, it's hurting the first-time home buyer.
Oh, okay.
That's what's happening. It's hurting the first-time home buyer who doesn't have that pool of cash, that pot of cash, that, they have some. I mean, folks the pandemic are saving more cash than ever, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have the cash. Somebody in maybe my situation in life, I might have a little extra cash where I can say, well, if it's $20,000 over, that's fine. I'll pay it.
Yeah.
I want the house. I want my family to grow up. I want my grandkids to be in it. I'm ready to go.
Well,
I'll take
it's
that
interesting
risk.
because what you're talking about is a kind of a microeconomic so normally in a transaction, and this is just like really, really micro, but during a transaction, there's how much more you are willing to pay for a thing than the price, and that's called consumer surplus. And then there's how much more or how much less the producer could have sold it for you, but then and got an underneath the price, and that's called producer surplus. So and the price is gonna kind of it's kind of always wiggling between there, and producers are always trying to play with the scale. They do sales.
You're talking
to
margin.
test it. Yeah.
Margin.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's a hypothetical number, right? Because you may go to a piece of bread and be like, gosh, I'd be willing, it's $5 a loaf of bread, and you'd be like, oh, I'm willing to pay $10 for it, but I got it for $5. That $5 extra is consumer surplus because you would have been paying for $5. Now, obviously, producers are trying to squeeze as much of that consumer surplus out of you as possible, but of course, on the flip side, they don't want to lose customers, right? Now, what seems to be happening here is that because of the supply, producers are able to squeeze out that surplus in the form of cash. The bread's worth $5 from a market perspective.
But I'm going to push back a little bit about that. So you're assuming we can produce our way out of this, and we can't.
Well, no,
No, that's not what he's saying.
No, I'm not saying from a producer. I'm talking from a consumer side.
Okay, got it.
I'm willing. I go to a house. I'm willing to pay $10,000 more, even though it's $10,000 more
Got
than
it.
it's worth.
Got
The
it.
fact that there is this entire demand system, right, where built in as a consumer, a desire for the utility. I'm willing to pay more than it's worth.
I misunderstood you.
Yeah,
And so because of the situation, you
because
now
of the
are
situation,
paying
yes,
more,
because of the situation, the producer or the seller is able to squeeze that out of certain people who have that money. So
Xavier's got some here.
Well, no, so I have a question really for Keith. Something that I've been thinking.
Time's up.
Something
like, it wasn't for me.
It's not a tough question. It's something I've been thinking about, right? So we have two interesting dichotomies here, right? We have the baby boomers who are retiring, right? And in some cases probably want to say, yeah, I got a 4-bedroom house. I don't need a 4-bedroom house anymore. I want a 2-bedroom house. So they're downsizing. We have first-time buyers, millennials, who are probably saying, I don't want a 4-bedroom house. I don't want a 2-bedroom house because I can't afford a 4-bedroom house. So we have it seems like we have the same folks we have two different folks looking for the same house. But as you mentioned, the difference is the baby boomer says, I've got $1 million home here, and I'm trying to buy a $600,000 home, and I'm good to go, right? Or whatever it is. I'm just throwing a number out in the sense that they've got the cash because they've got cash in that house. The first-time home buyer, millennial, saying, well, yeah, I don't have. I've got basically 20%. So is that happening also?
So it's interesting you should say that because that's what the article I sent out to you guys earlier this morning because we were talking yesterday a little bit about the Forever House, and for those who watch the show or listen to the show know I'm a recovering developer and I've built many, many hundreds of homes, and 99% of them were retirees coming out of the Northeast or wherever they were, somewhere between the 15 to 70, and they said, this is my forever home, I'm never going to move. We are now reselling those homes because they are moving. And there's a couple of neat bar charts that Wall Street Journal has done. They've done a survey between 2019 and 2020. Downsizing was it was less than 10% of the market, and it was from 56 to 95. The lower ages are not downsizing. So that number isn't very, very big. But the interesting big numbers are life changes, 35%, and household, which is for the go ahead, help me out here, but a 20 to 30-year-old group, and then the household health, thank you. Health of the members was my age group, 60 and up. So
No, that's the 75 and up. The health.
Don't do that to me live. Don't do that to me live. Yeah.
I was like, you're not that old. You're not.
No, I was combining these two. That's
well, that's true. Okay, that's fair.
So between 60 and 95 is between almost 35, almost 50% of the market. For
health reasons, they're moving out of their home.
That's exactly right. Which is, I'm having conversations with my parents about that same very thing.
Which is something you think about. So I'm curious, as two people, this is even more of a personal thing, as two people who, obviously in the next 10 years, Nick and I are people that are going to be, probably in the next 5 years, looking at first-time home. What do you... So
you're engaged.
So you're living less than that.
I know a realist.
Yeah, no. Well, hey, listen, you get the call.
How do you navigate...
Can you give me the Yonna? That's what the phone
I
call
was like, hey, Keith, how's Yonna doing?
You're basically saying, how can you buy a first-time house?
Yeah, in other words, how do you navigate that with someone who's young, a first-time home buyer, given the market that you're looking at? I mean, is it just adjusting their
You
expectations?
hope Emergent Financial Services kills it.
And you are.
Which they are killing it. Yeah.
So you've literally touched on a show that I'm trying to put together, and you just volunteered for it. A first-time home buyer seminar, right? Where we would have a conversation. We will bring your better 7/8.
She's not going to come on the show.
Really?
We're going to have to bring Alex. We're going to put a wig on Alex, and he'll pretend that he'll stand in
That's
for
what
the
it is,
better
a wig.
7/8.
That's just today, right? He puts the wig on, or does he do that regularly?
Just
We won't talk about that. That's another show.
I've got a hat.
Yeah, the hat, the Gandalf hat.
But that is literally a show that I've been concocting in my head to come in. What is that conversation like?
Well, what's your strategy? I don't want to get too personal. You don't have to answer this, but
the
Strategy is A, get married, B, call Keith.
yeah, there you go. It's a good strategy.
I mean, the funny thing is, I didn't mention this
Hey,
to you
Yonna,
yet,
talk
but
to
one
Nick.
of the things I talked about with my fiance was like, you're gonna have to have a cup of coffee with Keith and talk through, because part of the thing is that, or at least for me, I'm like, I don't want to. So
She
my
really
fiance,
wouldn't come on?
She wouldn't come.
She's
on.
working.
First of all, she's working right now, which is why she's not listening, and so I can say these things. But
You realize this gets lives on. And
yeah,
you realize
she'll watch the show
I'll know
tomorrow
where
and
the
be
link
like,
is to
Yeah.
text to her.
No, you can just, I'm
We'll
texting her and be
bleep
like,
these
you were
parts.
mentioned on the show extensively.
Hey, Judah, scissor reel this. Go ahead,
Yeah.
say something.
Say something awful. But one of the things we talked about is like, at the same time, you don't want to be able to like, okay, I can afford this house now, but it's going to cost me a 40-minute trip to work, because
So the first conversation is not money.
it's not money. Okay. finance guy.
Yeah, I know
already
that.
wrong.
And, well, the first conversation is for us to understand what you and what's your fiance's first name? Elizabeth's real needs and wants and desires are. Where are they now? Where do they want to be in the short term, and where they want to be in the long term?
Big kitchen.
Okay. Well,
Big kitchen.
you're actually getting to home already.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I
This
just
is
need
more big. So what what's your vision? You're going to have children. When do you want to have children? Those type of conversations. We want to. We've just met for the first time. So we just want to get to know each other. What is your goals? Then we'll work into the conversation. Is have you looked around a little bit? Well, yeah, I have. Okay, great idea. Have you talked to a trusted advisor like Scott Morris on, what can I afford? What programs are out there for first-time home buyers? Yada yada yada. So it's a much more complicated conversation. Other than, well, if you don't have 5%. See you next week, right? That kind of thing. Okay. And most of the conversations we have with first-time home buyers is reach out to Emergent Financial, if you're not quite there yet, or Scott Morris, or help you try to get your finances get your credit rating up a little bit, which I'm sure is all fine.
Get that Roth IRA opened up.
Get that kind of stuff.
It's interesting because you talk about the same process we do right off the bat with the financial planning, because it's goal-based. Because again, like as Quentin Beckham had mentioned yesterday, your goal is not necessarily to save money, because as we know, saved money is, what's it called? Save money.
Store of value. Money is medium of exchange, store of value. Right. Meaning
it's a tool.
It's a tool.
It's a tool.
It's a tool. And the only reason you save it is in order to be able to purchase things
in
later.
The future.
So
in the future.
How important is buying a home with the age group you're in?
Ooh, great question.
I mean, I can only speak personally, but it's significant. And maybe this is because I'm in a finance space, but I suspect it's the case, because I have some friends and I suspect similar. We all have this kind of sense that renting is not what we want to do long term. When you rent, you are shelling out a lot of money per month to something that is not yours, and which is basically just lining someone else's pocket.
You're not investing.
So I'm going to answer that question for you according to the stats.
What's the survey?
One of the questions, never moving. Only 6% was between 20 to 30 that answered that out of how many thousands that they
say that they would never move.
They would never move. In other words, they would stay in their rental or something like they would never move, meaning go in to buy it. Then so around 12% were the 30 to 40, then it starts jumping up, in the late 40s all the way up. So I'm assuming you're in that age group. I don't really know how old you are, but I'm assuming you're in that.
I think you're 28, right?
29.
Yeah. So you're in that. You're in that 22 to 30. So you're in that.
So in other words, highly unlikely to say I would never move.
No.
Or
exactly right. So you're looking for that home to buy, that next opportunity.
And to be honest, even for me, I'm sort of looking at it's the same thing we were talking about before. It's not a forever home. In other words, you look around at the home market and you sit there and say, there's a good chance I will end up buying a home to build equity in it, with the understanding at some point I'm going to swap it for something else. I'm not going to move straight into a home that I will then be living in for 40 years. And it's not a disaster that that's the case. Because building equity, in other words, I would rather buy a home and build equity in it and then move to a larger one than pay rent for a bunch of years, build no equity, and then move to a larger one.
So that's why between 22 and 40, almost 50 to 60, if I do the math right, about 50% were life changes. You got married, right? You wanted to move out of dad's house or not, or dad and mom's house,
Dad
Or dad and mom want you to move out of the house.
Did you say mom wants to move out of the house?
No, I said your dad and mom want you to move out of the house. Yeah, I was going to say. But it's interesting because in that article you sent me, I had two big takeaways. One was that some of the people that got interviewed for your Wall Street Journal article had said that the reason they wanted to move was because of other factors, like their house no longer fit what kind of like their personal aesthetic. They wanted to have a change. Another was that they wanted to like move to a place that was like either closer to family or like was more about their lifestyle change. Like they want to be closer to a city so that they could like go to restaurants and do this and that.
It's not about money. It's about lifestyle.
The only thing is there was one where her property taxes were too high. And if you want to talk about something that may affect the housing market, if inflation goes up and housing properties go up and then property taxes start hitting higher, you're going to see more people like trying to move out of places with higher property taxes to places where there's less, or getting a smaller value home because, or lower, or trying to at least, because you can't afford it. I mean, we've talked to people who are worried about property taxes in Charlottesville because they'll have to move.
Well, that's why on Friday with Jesse Rutherford, and we were talking about tax assessment. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the equalization rate, the equalizing, the value goes up, rate goes back and forth, so they're paying roughly the same amount of cash out of pocket into that. But it's a real thing. That's something that pushes gentrification, frankly.
Yeah, that is gentrification.
Well,
I know
you're
at least
taxing an illiquid asset. I mean, you can't make income from your home unless you rent.
You're taxing an illiquid asset, and a lot of times it's impacting people that are retired or living on a budget that don't have any more extra money to give.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it pushes them out. This is a question for Xavier from Kevin. If people are saving more money than ever, could that be the reason why we have a labor shortage, Xavier? People may have conditioned themselves during the pandemic to live on less, very similar to what Nick said with the mother eating one fish per day.
But I think that just lasts, that kind of philosophy will last very little. In other words, you saved a lot more under a period of time, but will those savings survive for X number of years? It may be short term, and you say, for the short term, I don't want to get a job, I don't need a job, maybe I'll do something different. But over the long run, I think we all need some income beyond your savings.
And Americans typically are terrible savers.
Yes, they are. Historically,
Yeah,
that's
historically we're
correct.
horrendous.
And the only reason we good savers last year was because there was
there's
nothing to
do.
do. And the government gave you a whole bunch of money.
And
So
the
it's like-
government forced us to stay home.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
and
I
then
mean-
they gave us free money.
Exactly. So all three said, this is
Yeah.
great.
Your quality, you got to
so
think about your
much.
quality of life.
Some
You
of
have
us
to.
traveled, I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
I was saying, but you got to think about your quality. Like, you can stay home and scrimp and eat one fish a day, but I mean, first of all, that was my grandmother, right, in Sicily, and they didn't want to be doing that. Like,
Yeah.
they
Right.
had to.
They weren't happy with
you
the one
had
fish
to
per
eat.
day.
Yeah, I was about to say you had to eat the head and everything if you wanted to be full for the next day. And I'm sure most Americans aren't necessarily eating the whole fish. So
Well, that
keep
was
in
during the
mind.
Great Depression, right?
Yes, that was during the Depression and the war. The war was
yeah.
really bad for Italians. Like, it was hard to go
Well, my
fishing.
mother-in-law used to tell me stories. I mean, that woman, God love her, she could take a chicken and stretch it for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Figure out all the ways.
How do you stretch a chicken for 2 weeks?
I have no idea.
You eat
She's
everything.
passed on. She
Soup,
went-
croquetas. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of stuff
Yeah,
you can do with a chicken.
Well, I mean, we just did it with our turkey, right? We've got.
Yep.
I've got like gallons of turkey soup that we freeze, and we'll.
Yeah.
You know,
Jerry, the
Turkey
secret is
soup?
you're eating the parts that you, as Americans, probably don't eat generally.
I think
You're
that-
not going to make pasta and peas with chicken livers.
I think that very well said.
That's great. I love it. I love it. But most Americans cringe at the thought of like gizzards and other things that
So
make
I
food
met
so great.
I met Yonna for about a week, and she said, "I'll come on over. I'll cook you dinner." You know what she made me? Chicken liver. It was excellent. Chicken
Yeah.
livers, and she was like, and I like this is something my family always used to eat. Right, this was a thing.
It's not
Yeah.
unusual, when you have
Right.
European background.
Yeah.
And so it was funny.
You try it with the Boston peas. It's great.
This is an interesting question. One you may not want to answer. We're going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So
I love it when he sets them up.
Steven watching the program's got a two-part question. Says, can you ask the Urpís if the markets are now past Omicron and the impact it could have? So we've touched on that briefly.
We did.
And then the follow-up is, how would they characterize President Biden so far with managing the economy and growing the economy through a year in office?
That's an Alex question.
I mean, I feel like you've asked me
no
that.
divisive
I know.
politics.
You've asked me that
That's
before.
I can't answer this question. Yeah. We'll send it to
I'm the more
Alex.
diplomatic one. No, you
Thank
asked
you,
me that
Alex.
before, and my answer then was as now. It unfortunately there are some things that leave a lot to be desired. I mean, we talked a little bit
But
on it
does the
today.
president really control?
Oh, the president
Yeah.
has a lot of influence.
He has influence, and
Yeah.
ultimately
He sets
the
the
president
tone,
is
he signs the
responsible for
bills.
people he hires.
Okay.
In that sense, because as we can see, the Commerce Department has making some decisions that are a little bit baffling. Some of the gas price decisions have been
doubling the
doubling
tariff.
the tariff.
I don't get that.
Makes no sense. a lot of in terms of the energy policy has been rather baffling, only in the sense of
Baffling? Is that the word you want to use?
Baffling is
Baffling,
the only really thing
yes.
that is used, because I mean,
Confusing,
you made
frustrating,
moves to constrict,
horrendous, aggravating.
well, you made moves to constrict oil production and then open up the strategic reserve, which is using oil. So just things of
Instead
that
of saving
nature.
it for an emergency, like you're not thinking properly.
Things of that nature, I think we are seeing that the inflation has just not been managed particularly well.
Yeah.
And impossible, one of the things about economics, right, impossible to know what the counterfactual is. But there are some things that just, we looked at it from an economic perspective and say, there are things that leave a lot to be desired, that we would like to see that have not happened.
But that's kind of normal, though.
But
That's always the case, right? No matter who's in office.
It is the case.
Everybody thinks things should be done a little bit different. Everybody's
Right.
got an opinion, right? And we know
Exactly.
we know what they're like.
For me, it's always, and I think one of the key things is always less the policy, but like, are things consistent and make sense? And things like the Commerce, then you sit there and say,
I don't
that
get
seems
that.
neither consistent with the rest of the stated goal of policy, right? Making things more affordable for people, nor does it make sense.
Yeah.
How we good on time, guys? We're
Good.
We're
We're a
good?
couple more minutes.
I might want to ask a high-level question, just something, because I'm going to ask it on Friday, and I'd like it from your perspective. Had a great conversation with my youngest daughter. She's got a master's degree in education, and he's a doc. Substantial amount of student loans debt. And I think that's impacting first-time home buyers a lot. I just kind of wanted to throw that topic out and see what you guys think, and what's the possible solutions to it. Because even if mom and dad gave them enough money for a 5% down payment, I don't think the student loan debts will let them get past their loan, their debt to income ratio at this
Ratio.
You
particular
want to
point.
know what the number one thing is? I say call a trusted advisor. I mean, we talk about this all the time, but
Marketing guy.
well, no, but at the same time, it's true because everyone's situation is also going to be different. Some people's student loans will take them further than others.
Sure.
They could be in different economic situations. Now, one of your daughters lives in Seattle, correct?
Correct.
That's a different living space than Charlottesville, Virginia. It's also different from anywhere else in the country. So part of the thing is like you want to look at the whole picture because student loans are just a part of all that. Now I'm going to let it go at Alex, but keep an eye.
It does have a significant impact, but as you
Yes.
know that it's a loan, it's a debt hanging over you that is basically impossible to eradicate, right? You can't declare bankruptcy and get out of student loan debt, right?
You can't.
You cannot. That's what I
That's
said.
an
You
important
cannot.
thing to say.
You cannot do that. You cannot say, "Hey, I'm bankrupt. I don't know these student loans."
It's like taxes. It won't go away.
It won't go away. The second thing is also, I think, because of the moratorium on the interest,
Yes.
a lot of my generation is saying, why on earth would I do anything other than pay down with any extra cash I have, pay down these loans, get that principal down as much as possible in this period in which interest is neither accumulating nor owed. It's different if it was being accrued.
Do you think people actually did that?
Oh,
Significant
I know
portions?
people who have.
I
know
can
people
tell you
who
my
have
daughter
done
has done that.
Yeah, I know people who have done that. So
Yeah.
basically, every extra cent they have is going to pay down the student loans in this period because remember, the interest isn't even accruing. So it's not as though in other words, it's not as though the interest is growing even though you don't have to pay it. I mean, if you pay down that principal, you will never have to pay interest on that piece.
So that's what we did. We looked at her loans and said, okay, this is at 6%, this is at 4%, this is at 2%. Okay, the 6%, you had X amount of dollars. Yonna and I helped out a little
Yep.
bit.
Why doesn't she consolidate that debt into one loan? Why does she have separate loans like that at
I've-
various rates?
I've been
Consolidate the debt.
I've been suggesting that.
Yeah, that's
It
the
also
first
depends
step.
it depends on what you have. In other words, if you have a very large number that's subsidized student loan, right, and a very small number that's unsubsidized, if you could get rid of the complete unsubsidized piece, then your subsidized student loan may be lower than something you could consolidate it.
So that's literally how we're looking at it. So the 6% stuff is the unsubsidized stuff. We're trying to pay that principal down while she's not collecting or accruing interest on that end of it. But you're 100% right, Jerry. And the interesting thing, and I'm going to ask Scott about this, because it moves from a different product, right? So if they can go from a student loan that is you can't file bankruptcy on, or you can't get out of it and move it to something else, you have a little bit more
More
flexibility. That you can
More
do.
flexibility. And the other thing to keep in mind is as we get back, even as we get back into the period when interest rates will be eroded, and one of the keys to think about that sometimes people don't is the instant, and we see this interesting enough with mortgages as well, there's a tendency to fear debt such that you say, I must pay down all my debt now, right? And our point is always, it depends on the interest rate.
Yeah.
So from an
That's-
emotional
Exactly.
perspective, right? So my daughter lived through the time of great unpleasantness. I tell the story all the time. The car that we got her was from a client who couldn't pay us, that passed away. That she had was a 1992 green Ford Escort, lime green. Hated the car.
Love the color.
But so she remembers that,
'Cause it's
and she scrapped with all this debt. Right?
So there's an emotional
That's exactly right.
desire, and I feel it myself. Like, debt free. Got to make sure I pay it all. And the key we taught people is no. The key is the interest rate.
So Xavier, what, in your opinion, this is a loaded question because I know what I'm going to get when I ask it. What can the government do to help this student loan debt thing?
I hope
if
you say
anything?
nothing. I hope you say nothing.
I asked you specifically that question.
Yeah, and I think
Is
that's
there
the
anything
answer,
they
I
can
think.
do that makes sense?
No, nothing at all. And what I was going to say to Alex, I think there's two group of people that own student loans. It's the group that owns student loans and look at it and say, I use this to obviously to fuel my career through school, and they're looking from the perspective that, yes, the faster I pay off this loan, the better. And I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of people out there saying, sooner or later,
They're going to just wipe it off.
they're going to pardon those
Yeah.
student loans, so why should I pay it off? And that's a
It's the
big
two-
issue,
the
and that's
two-
a big problem.
But one thing I would add to that is, I think there's only so much they can do for the current generation. I think the government to do a lot of good for the next generation
But how do
of
you
students.
do that? How do you do
No,
that
no,
fairly?
There's a lot of good they can do for the next generation of students by getting out of the business.
Right, and just
And the reason I say
do
that
nothing.
because the government being in the student loan business keeps the interest rates for student loans lower than they would otherwise be, thereby encouraging people to take them who may be better off going into the trades, going
Yeah.
into a
So
different
thank you
line.
for saying that. I don't have the exact stat with me, but I can talk about it at the periphery. This is the first time, if you get out of school with a BA, unless it's some very specific thing, if they are making less money than people coming out of trade school.
Out of
Absolutely,
trades.
exactly.
And unfortunately, I think
Trade
the very low,
1 year
the
certificate.
I don't work
artificially
during
low.
school. I was a busboy,
Yeah.
a waiter, a bartender, a host,
Because it's
clean cars,
artificially
and
low,
cut
right?
grass.
I mean, if the government wasn't
That's
subsidizing
exactly
them,
right.
if you went to
Pay
a private
yourself
person,
for school.
Yeah.
if you went to a
Yeah.
private company and did a student loan, the rate would be much higher than it currently is, which would make the next generation say, do I want to do that? Like, do I want to take a 9%, 10% student loan when maybe the trade is...
So
The loans are
literally-
that high, the interest rates?
No, that's what it
private.
would
If it was
be.
private, right?
If it was private, what I'm
loan.
saying is,
Yeah.
if the government was artificially subsidizing it by being the only student
Which has
loan
also
provider,
inflated the price of tuition.
right, then the rates would be higher. A private person would not give you a student loan at 2%.
Literally, the conversation my daughter and son-in-law who's a doctor, my daughter who's a teacher, are having. Our children, we're not going to pressure them to go into college.
Absolutely.
We're gonna suggest a trade. Now, that's today. They don't have any children.
In
Yeah.
college, when they're kids who are actually not born yet.
That's
okay?
exactly- but
it's
I will-
going to be completely
It's
different
something
than
that
it
the
is
parents
but I will-
really need to think about, because there is a social pressure temptation to say, oh yeah, my kid was sent to college, when there may come a point when I think parents need to be aware that if your son says to you or your daughter, hey, I want to go into this trade, don't discourage it. Don't be
Right.
like, no, you got to go to a four-year
So
college.
my oldest daughter, which has children, a 3-year-old, my grandson's going to be, what's today, 7? He's going to be 3-year-old in 2 days from now.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. To him.
To him, I was saying to the camera.
Oh, thank you. The camera's 3 years old.
No.
She's like saying, look, I'm not going to pressure my kid to go into it. Now, she's a tradesperson,
Right.
right? She's a makeup artist. She does very well. She's a head makeup artist on movies and all this kind of great stuff. My son-in-law, is a CPA. He's in your
a controller.
field, your field. So obviously, you need to have an education for
Right.
that. But Yasmina's doing really well in the trades, in the hand skill stuff.
It's not something to, don't give in to the social pressure of the four-year institution and let it override what can be a financial standard of living that you can get a really good one.
So what's the advice you give to the son-in-law and his daughter? hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt and wanting to buy a house.
Oh, do exactly what they're doing. They're analyzing it, they're figuring out, do we consolidate, and they're paying off the bigger one, the higher interest rate first.
Yeah.
In a period in which, right now, there's no accrued interest. They're doing exactly, and they're talking to the right
So
people.
Xavier's spot on, by the way. The first conversation was exactly what Xavier said. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see what the federal government does. And I was like, no, you guys need to start whittling this down.
You can't take the chance.
Because it's always easier to promise it on the government side than do it.
Yeah.
And deliver it.
I think that's called politics.
Yeah.
Getting
So
elected.
you can't rely. I mean, that's why again we talk about these things about like again just not to get into politics, but like you can't rely on your politicians or government officials to do things because it's not only just them. Like even if like they promise the moon and they intend to do it, they have to go through a whole bunch of loops and boundaries, and it's
there. At least at a local level, I can speak pretty intimately about that. The intent is there, but
Yeah.
the process gets in
Yeah.
gets in the way.
We'll close her up. Tell us a tease for Thursday.
Thursday, we have some new ones.
we have Jeff
coming in Thursday.
Camrith from the Aqua Hand Wash
The
CVille,
entrepreneur. That's
Yes,
a good
the
get for you
entrepreneur.
guys.
and
As well as a local winemaker.
yes, so 12 Ridges Vineyard.
Very nice.
We're getting Craig
12 Ridges.
Goldberg from 12 Ridges to come on, and
It's gonna be
those
a-
are going to be our two guests for this
Nicely
week.
done,
be a fun
Nickolas.
show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
Jeff Cameron, UVA baseball alum, now an entrepreneur, owns the car wash, I believe, next to Bodo's, right?
Yeah,
Close to Bodo's.
yeah, it's around there. I remember I saw it the other day.
That's a big time get.
Yeah.
Jeff's a great guy. Today, Mañana airs at 10:15 a.m. on Thursdays on the I Love CVille Network, co-hosted by the closer and the Antonio Banderas of finance, Alex and Xavier Urpí. Nickolas Urpí, I just a huge fan of. He's
Thank you,
right
Jerry.
there. Nickolas Urpí. Keith Smith, of course, of Yes Realty Partners. Keith, great show today.
I totally love these shows.
Me too.
I mean, this is just a lot of fun. This
It
is
is.
just like, you know what this is like? This is like just family getting together,
At a table.
having a cup of coffee, and just
having dinner and right.
this is a
absolutely.
dinner.
Yeah.
I don't know about your house, but this is a normal dinner conversation
It is.
and all that stuff. We start off grab hands and we pray, and then everybody hold on because here we go. Here we go.
What do you have on Friday for Real Talk?
I've got Scott Morris coming in. I'm trying to find a fourth seat for that, but loan officers are a little busy, and maybe try to see if we can get an appraiser in to kind of talk a little bit about that. But we're gonna do a little crystal balling, on what does he think in 2022 is going to look like? Is Realtor.com right or wrong?
It's going to be a good show,
That'll be a
guys.
good one. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Today, Mañana, Thursdays at 10:15, Real Talk. The next episode is on Friday. I Love CVille show in 34 minutes, and we hope you enjoyed the extended version of Real Talk today. You guys have a fantastic morning, and we'll see you in 34 on the I Love CVille show. Take care.
Thank you,
Nicely
gentlemen.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Always
Jerry.
a pleasure.